Honorable Minister, Ukraine is trying to isolate Russia from partnership with the African continent. In the context of Mozambique, one can recall the case when the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemned the visit of the Pan-African Parliament delegation, which included a representative from Mozambique, to the Donetsk People's Republic in 2024. What are the reasons, in your view, behind such a strategy by Kiev?
Well, you know, the reasons are the same. Russophobia and the desire to eradicate everything Russian from the history of those lands that made up Ukraine at the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union. To our great regret, as a result of many years of efforts, the West ultimately brought to power outright Russophobes, neo-Nazis, who carried out and continue to carry out an agenda to weaken Russia by creating, right on Ukrainian territory, direct threats to our security and, as I already said, by eradicating everything Russian, including the historical memory of how this country came to be and to whom it owes its very existence. I probably don't even need to list more reasons. They are all obvious. But the fact that this was indeed the West's goal can be seen now, when Europe is enraged. I can't find a better word. There's even a pun that comes to mind. They are now part of an international frenzy against the Russian Federation, constantly agitating their peoples, instilling in them, in the spirit of Goebbels-style propaganda, that Russia is an eternal enemy, an existential threat, that Russia is about to attack Europe. Therefore, they say, forget about social problems, forget about economic failures, forget about the deindustrialization process that is happening, including in Germany and other European countries, and throw all forces, all resources, all taxes exclusively into the militarization of Europe. And this is sad. One must not forget the lessons of history, but clearly they are being poorly learned by the current generation, both Germans and the French and representatives of other European countries. Of course, they say the son is not responsible for the father. The grandson is not responsible for the grandfather. That is true. If the son and grandson have realized the criminal nature of what their parent, their grandfather followed, the crimes represented by the Third Reich, which was condemned forever and irrevocably at the Nuremberg Tribunal. But when the descendants of those Germans, having taken leadership positions in today's Federal Republic, regardless of their personal origins, start not just promoting, but proudly presenting demand to everyone in the spirit of what now resembles a Fourth Reich, it naturally raises concerns that such a revival of Nazism must not be allowed. And I am convinced that the peoples of European countries, including the same part of the German people, understand this perfectly well. And any attempts, like those now voiced by German defense ministers, for example, stating they must and will be ready to kill Russian soldiers, the statements of NATO leaders that they are about to crush the Kaliningrad region preemptively, well, that probably sends a very alarming signal to any normal, I emphasize, normal person, about the kinds of plans being brewed in Brussels, in Berlin, and also, of course, in Paris and London. So, the reasons for such a strategy are impunity and the constant incitement of the Kiev regime to continue provocations, to continue terrorist acts against civilian targets, against peaceful citizens of the Russian Federation. These actions do not stop, and of course, they will receive a worthy response, and Russia will achieve all the goals that the European Union is trying to block through the hands of the Kiev regime. I very much hope that a reasonable approach demonstrated by the Trump administration in this situation, after it replaced the Biden administration, which marched in lockstep with the hysterical Europeans, that this reasonable approach, which includes a willingness to engage in dialogue, a willingness to listen and hear, will not go unnoticed by the Europeans, despite all the current discussions that once again and again, they must arm the Kiev regime at the expense, I emphasize, once more, of European taxpayers.
Good afternoon. A question for Sergey Lavrov. In connection with the sanctions imposed on the financial sector, are alternative mechanisms of interaction in the sphere of banking transfers with African countries being developed?
Thank you. Well, these mechanisms have been functioning for quite some time, are being improved, and primarily involve the increasingly broad use of national currencies. But not only that, there are also other mechanisms that do not depend on the whims and fancies of those who would like to make economic sanctions the main instrument of their foreign policy in order to maintain global hegemony. That will not succeed simply because the objective course of history is moving in a completely different direction, toward multipolarity, toward equality. By the way, in the direction of the very principles written in the UN Charter, which have never been respected by the West. Now the time has come to reckon with objective reality. Yes, this process will take some time. The West will resist. The instruments that the West currently uses on the international stage, illegal sanctions, protectionism, seizure of others' property, rejection of the presumption of innocence, all of this, as I've already said, is now being tested by the objective course of history. And while one can, of course, fight against the objective course of history, in the end, it will prevail. And the mechanisms of settlement, both with our African friends and with all our other trading partners, certainly exist and are functioning effectively.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HD videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.